Dawn broke over the Charlestown Peninsula on June 17, 1775. The air was thick with tension and the scent of earth. A young militiaman, barely 16, gripped his musket, heart pounding. All night he and hundreds of others had dug trenches and built a crude redoubt atop Breed's Hill. Below, Boston slept under fog, unaware of the transformation above. British warships loomed in the harbor, silent but menacing. Every sound, shovel scraping, whispered orders, felt amplified in the heavy stillness. These were not soldiers by trade, but farmers, blacksmiths, and merchants, united by a cause. They had dared to build a fortress on the king's doorstep, defying the world's most powerful army. The rising sun revealed their work to the British aboard HMS Lively. A cannon blast shattered the morning calm. The storm was coming. The men braced themselves, knowing the British would soon unleash their fury. Colonel William Prescott walked the lines, his calm presence steadying the men. He reminded them, they fought for their homes and rights as free-born Englishmen. The idea of a new nation was still distant. Today they fought simply to be heard. The stillness was over. The battle for liberty was about to begin. The British giants were stirring. The men in the redoubt had done the impossible, fortifying the hill in a single night. The smell of gunpowder now mixed with the morning air. The silence shattered, replaced by the thunder of warships. The rebels stood ready, their resolve about to be tested. On this day, they would prove they would not be broken. The battle on Breed's Hill was the result of years of rising tension. After the French and Indian War, Britain taxed the colonies to pay its debts, without colonial representation. No taxation without representation became the rallying cry. Protests grew, boycotts spread, and violence erupted. The Boston Massacre, the Boston Tea Party. Britain responded with the Intolerable Acts, closing Boston's port and placing the city under military rule. Instead of crushing rebellion, these acts united the colonies. The First Continental Congress petitioned the king, but it was too late. British troops marched to seize colonial arms at Concord, met by Minutemen at Lexington and Concord. The "shot heard round the world" was fired. By nightfall, the British were trapped in Boston, surrounded by a swelling colonial army. The siege of Boston had begun. For weeks, British and colonial forces stared each other down across Boston's narrow neck. The key to the city was the high ground, Dorchester Heights and the hills of Charlestown. Whoever held these heights could dominate Boston. Learning the British planned to seize them, colonial leaders acted first. On June 16, 1775, Colonel William Prescott led 200 men to fortify Bunker Hill. With him was Dr. Joseph Warren, a leader who chose to fight as a volunteer. Under cover of darkness, they marched out, debating whether to fortify Bunker Hill or the closer, riskier Breed's Hill. They chose Breed's Hill, closer to Boston and more provocative. All night, they dug trenches and built a redoubt, racing against dawn. Prescott oversaw the work, building a square fort and a breastwork stretching toward the Mystic River. British sentries across the water called "All's Well," unaware of the silent, desperate labor underway. By sunrise, the Americans had transformed the hill. The stage was set for battle. At sunrise, the British were stunned to see a fort on Breed's Hill. General Gage and his generals agreed. The rebels must be driven off. They prepared a direct assault, confident the militia would break. British warships bombarded the hill, cannonballs tearing into the redoubt. Charlestown was set ablaze, smoke and flames rising as a backdrop. Inside, Colonel Prescott walked the parapet, steadying his men. British troops, over 2,200, landed and formed up for attack. The Americans, low on ammunition, were ordered to hold their fire. "Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes," a command born of necessity and tactical brilliance. The men waited, nerves taut, as the British advanced. The moment of reckoning was near. Under the blazing sun, British lines advanced up Breed's Hill, bayonets gleaming. The sight was meant to intimidate, but the Americans held their ground in tense silence. The British lines stretched from the Mystic River to the hill's base, General Howe leading the right, Piggott the left. Inside the redoubt, The militia lay flat, muskets ready, waiting for the order. The British drew closer. 100 yards, 75, 50. Officers whispered, "Wait for it." The Americans, ordinary men turned soldiers, showed iron discipline. The British expected a wild volley and a rout. Instead, at point-blank range, the command came, "Fire!" A thunderous volley tore through the British front ranks. Hundreds fell. The red lines broke, retreating in chaos down the hill. The Americans had stopped the world's best infantry cold. Cheers erupted in the redoubt, triumph and disbelief. General Howe was stunned, his best companies decimated. But British pride would not accept defeat. Howe ordered his men to reform at the base. The dead and wounded were cleared. The drums beat again. The British would attack once more. The Americans reloaded, their elation fading to grim resolve. Ammunition was running low. The fight was far from over. The next assault would be even fiercer. The hill ran red with blood. The British, undeterred by heavy losses, prepared for a second assault. General Howe ordered his men to drop their packs and try again. The redcoats stepped over fallen comrades, faces set with grim determination. On the hill, the Americans' ammunition dwindled. Powder was shared along the line. Reinforcements were slow, many refusing to cross under British fire. The defenders knew they were on their own. Once more the British advanced, drums beating. The Americans held their fire, waiting for the perfect moment. Another devastating volley shattered the British ranks at close range. The redcoats broke and fled again, leaving the slope littered with bodies. Twice the militia had repulsed a professional army. General Howe, bloodied but unbowed, prepared for a third attack. The Americans faced a new crisis. Their powder was almost gone. The British would not give up. The defenders braced for the final assault. The outcome would hinge on courage and the last few rounds of powder. The hill was a crucible of fire and resolve. The base of the hill was a scene of carnage, but retreat was not an option for the British. General Clinton rallied the troops for one last, desperate push. This time the British fixed bayonets, determined to take the redoubt with cold steel. Inside, the Americans were nearly out of ammunition, breaking open cartridges for powder. Colonel Prescott urged his men to make their last shots count. The final British assault surged forward. The Americans fired one last volley. The British staggered, but pressed on, swarming over the walls. Hand-to-hand combat erupted, muskets, rocks, bare hands. Prescott fought his way out, his coat pierced, but body unharmed. Dr. Joseph Warren was killed in the chaos, a devastating loss. The Americans, overwhelmed and out of ammunition, retreated in order, not panic. Captain Stark's men provided covering fire for the escape. The British, exhausted and decimated, could not pursue. They had taken the hill, but at a terrible cost. As one general said, a few more such victories would have ended British dominion in America. The term Pyrrhic victory was forever linked to Bunker Hill. Bunker Hill was one of the bloodiest battles of the war. The British lost over 1,000 men, nearly half their force. The Americans lost far fewer, but among them was Dr. Joseph Warren. The battle's story is one of individual courage. Peter Salem, a freed slave, is credited with killing Major Pitcairn in the final charge. Salem Poor, another African-American soldier, fought with such distinction that his officers petitioned Congress to honor him. The Army on the Hill was a cross-section of colonial society, men of all backgrounds united by purpose. Each casualty was a personal tragedy, each act of bravery a testament to the human cost of war. The battle was not just tactics and generals, but terror, courage, and sacrifice. The legacy of these unsung heroes endures. Though a tactical defeat, Bunker Hill was a strategic and psychological victory for the Americans. The myth of British invincibility was shattered. London was shocked by the losses. The war had truly begun. The Continental Army was formed, and George Washington arrived to take command, inspired by the militia's spirit. The battle taught hard lessons, especially the need for supplies and discipline. Bunker Hill transformed the conflict into a fight for independence. The image of farmers standing against redcoats became a symbol of American resolve. "Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes" became legend. The Bunker Hill Monument stands as a reminder of sacrifice. The battle's lessons still resonate. Courage is acting despite fear. Unity is forged in adversity. Ordinary people can rise to extraordinary challenges. The men on that hill fought for their homes and their future. Their legacy is a challenge to every generation. Stand up for what you believe in, no matter the odds.